There are great players in this league. However, all of a sudden they start winning championships. Why? Okay, I'll just say this. When Shaquille O'Neal played against us, he and Akeem balanced each other out. It wasn't like he's gonna dominate Akeem and Akeem's gonna dominate him.
The NBA might be a superstar-driven league, but if you wanna win, you need role players. The little guys that play hard on defense, set picks, hit timely jumpers, and everything else needed to win it all.
1 through 15, the thing that people don't know is every guy on that team plays a part in that championship year, from the guys on the bench to the dude who scores all the points. And if one person doesn't do their job, it just doesn't happen.
And that's what this video is, celebrating the best of the best. But I didn't want to make another boring list. So instead, in this video, I'm separating the role players by these categories you're looking at right now. I'll be picking from all the available players and ranking the top 5 players for each category. Since there's no strict definition of a role player I can go by, and many people seem to disagree about what role players are and aren't, I'm establishing a few rules. 1. No players that finish top 10 in MVP voting. 2. No former All-Stars turned role players. 3. No All-Star appearances, which actually takes out quite a few role players you may have thought. 4. No All-NBA teams, except all defensive teams don't count. And finally, at least one finals appearance, because winning matters in this league. Because of these rules, players like Manu Ginobili, Dennis Rodman, Mo Williams, Jamal Crawford, and Kyle Korver won't make the list, making this more difficult than I originally expected. And not gonna lie, some of the players on the list probably aren't what you expected. So with that in mind, let's figure out who are actually the greatest role players in NBA history. Since the league nowadays is three-point oriented, let's start with the shooters. To win today, you definitely need them. Players like LeBron and Giannis, who like to drive and kick, well, need shooters to kick out to. Or if your team relies on ball movement like the Warriors or the Pacers, then you need good shooters to hit those open shots. These guys are usually not the best one-on-one players, but they excel at running around screens and knocking down open shots. There are hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of great shooters in NBA history, so narrowing it down to 5 wasn't easy. Some, like Kyle Korver, who made an All-Star team averaging 12 points, didn't make the cut. But out of all these players shown here, the number 5 spot I'm gonna go with is someone who is relatively forgotten about, Brent Barry. Brent comes from a rich basketball background. His father is a Hall of Famer, his brothers played in the league, and his stepmom, Lynn Barry, is the most decorated women's basketball player in William and Mary history. While Brent wasn't the player his father was, he was a sharp shooter. Barry led the league in effective field goal shooting twice, once in true shooting and once in three-point percentage. While he never attempted more than 5 threes per game, teams attempted nearly 20 fewer threes per game in the 2000s than today. And he still shot a bit over 40% for his career. Brent's overall true shooting percentage is actually phenomenal. He's ranked 25th in NBA history, shooting over 60% for his career. Besides that, Barry was a surprisingly good athlete, a solid defender, and a playmaker when he needed to be. Did I mention he was 6'7"? Yeah, check out some of these passes.
The outlet to Brent Barry, the no-look to Romanovich into the lane. Tapped out front by Pipe. Barry goes and gets it. Barry to the hole to right corner. Much of their bench had to play. Barry, oh, nice look to Bryant.
Barry played his best seasons on the now defunct Sonics. From 2002 to 2004, he averaged 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists on a 64% true shooting percentage. That stint landed him on a $19 million 4-year contract in San Antonio. With the Spurs, Barry would become one of the league's best sharpshooters and secondary ball handlers. He also won titles there in 2005 and 2007. While he is an underrated player, he was never considered a top 3 shooter in the league. Unlike the next guy, aka number 4 on the list. If you've seen The Last Dance, you know that Jordan played with several great shooters. But one man who was left out of the documentary deserves his respect.
Couple of hoops together. Michael Jordan to the right side holding on Dunn. Right corner Hodges, another long jumper good, another...
Craig Hodges played a crucial role as a spot-up shooter on the late 80s and early 90s Bulls teams. He won 2 titles with Chicago, and he probably would have had 3 rings if he hadn't have been waived and blackballed out of the league following a White House visit in 1992, which I do go over in this video. But the question is, what places Hodges over Barry in my rankings? Well, since they both have 2 rings, we're gonna have to compare their careers individually. For one, Craig led the league in three-point percentage twice. In 1988, he shot an insane 49% from the three-point. Yes, 49%. He finished in the top 10 for three-pointers made for 3 more seasons and then 3 more in the top 20. I mean, simply put, compared to the players in his era of the late 80s and 90s, Hodges ranks much higher than Brent Barry. Oh, and we can't forget his three-point shootout performances.
Put on a show, Craig. Fans have been waiting for this. 12 in a row. 13 missed yet. A total of 30 points is possible. Look at this. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Besides Larry Bird, Hodges is still the only player to win the contest 3 times. In 1991, Hodges made 21 out of 25 possible shots, including connecting on 19 consecutive shots in a row. I mean, Hodges was so good that he made it into the 1993 competition despite not even being on a team. He was just that good. Okay, the third ranked player on this list was just as good and if not better than Hodges, but surprisingly, he never won the three-point contest. JJ Redick, skill-wise to me, is the best shooter on the list. He's been one of the best shooters in the past 2 decades. He's the only guy besides Curry, Clay, and Korver who ranks in the top 20 in league history in terms of both three-pointers made and percentage. And he's the only one out of the 4 who never made the All-Star team. Moreover, JJ ranks only behind Steph and Clay, having made over 200 three-pointers while shooting 40+% in 3 separate seasons. He also has the 3rd highest career three-point percentage on a minimum of 4,500 attempts, trailing behind Curry and Korver. Just as a side note, as Korver's name keeps popping up, if he hadn't made that single All-Star game, his name would definitely be on the list. Back to Redick. Now, right out of high school, JJ was one of the most highly sought-after recruits in the country. Unlike most McDonald's All-Americans, it wasn't because of his athleticism. It was because of his shooting. At Duke, JJ became one of the best scorers and most hated in college history, scoring 2,769 points and 457 three-pointers, the record at the time. Currently, JJ ranks 8th in three-pointers made in NCAA history. Despite a slow start to his career, he developed into one of the most productive three-point shooters in league history. So why isn't he ranked higher? Well, due to a lack of team success. Redick only made the finals once in 2009 with the Magic. The following year, he made the conference finals with Orlando again. And after that, he never made it past the second round. So, what places Mike Miller at number 2 over guys like JJ Redick and Craig Hodges? Well, it's the entire resume. Mike Miller is a player who reinvented himself multiple times throughout his NBA career. He started his career by winning the Rookie of the Year award playing Robin to T-Mac's Batman in Orlando. Mike became one of the best bench players in the league, even winning the 6th Man of the Year in Memphis. And at the tail end of his career, he became a catch-and-shoot specialist, helping Miami go back-to-back in the early 2010s. Although Miller played on 7 teams in his career, one thing remained consistent: his three-point shooting. What separated Mike from others in the early 2000s was that he came out of college as a solid three-point shooter, which wasn't the case for many players. But in the early days, he also had a decent mid-range game. Later in his career, he became one of the early adopters of the money ball way of playing. He focused more on efficient shot selection from either beyond the arc or at the rim. And during his Miami years, he shot over 40% on threes and nearly 60% from 0 to 3 feet from the rim. In Game 5 of the 2012 finals, Mike posted 7 three-pointers, a record for a player coming off the bench during the finals.
Miller for 3. Miller tries it again. Bang! Mike Miller on fire. 7 three-pointers.
The man was clutch too. If you needed a three-pointer, he would deliver. And sometimes he didn't even need shoes to do it.
He's playing with one sock, one shoe, and he's going to take a 3 and hit a 3!
However, the number 1 spot is reserved for a guy who can still be some of the best shooters of all time in his warm-ups, even though he hasn't played in 2 decades. Thanks to his post-playing career as a commentator and coach of the biggest dynasty in the last 20 years, Steve Kerr has remained a popular figure in the NBA world, so his choice here shouldn't be a huge surprise. But let's break it down to why he's the number 1 choice. For starters, Kerr is a winner. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. All jokes aside, the dude has always had a spot on great teams. He's one of the 13 players in history with as many rings as he has fingers on his shooting hand, and only 13 guys can say that they have more rings than him. Of course, then there's the sharpshooting. Steve was another dude that shot lights out during college. In his first full NCAA season in 1988 with the three-point line, he shot over 57% on more than 5 attempts per game. Yeah, this man was destined to coach Steph. As you know, because this is how Steve got his reputation, he continued shooting the lights out. Steve led the league in three-point percentage twice. He's the Cavs' three-point percentage leader of all time, as well as the Bulls' all-time leader. He won the All-Star three-point competition in 1997, and not to mention that he has the highest career three-point percentage in NBA history. One thing Kerr doesn't get enough credit for is that he was a pretty durable player for such a small dude. In the 5 regular seasons with the Bulls, he played 378 consecutive games before Jordan famously punched him in the face. Okay, so while Kerr did get punched in the face by MJ, it was actually Derek Coleman that fouled Steve Kerr so hard that he fractured his collarbone, sidelining him for 8 weeks. Another thing that gives Steve the #1 spot is the fact that he was never an expensive player. I mean, just look at his yearly salary and compare it to the league's median salary at the time. Yeah, it was about the same. With Steve, you'd get your money's worth, and you could always count on him in big moments. Just ask Greg Popovich.
Doesn't want a double because this man has been killing. Kerr again. Steve Kerr with another 3.
Yeah. Everyone knows about the 1997 finals. Game 6, clutch shot, it's iconic at this point. However, there's another Game 6 performance that doesn't get mentioned as often. In 2003, Kerr, 37 at the time, was on his last legs. Before Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals, Kerr logged only 13 minutes in the previous 17 games. When he entered the game, the Spurs were down 15 with 3 minutes and 44 seconds remaining in the third quarter. And over the next 13 minutes, Steve Kerr proceeded to knock down 4 threes on 4 attempts, dish out 3 assists, and even grab 2 rebounds. That performance sent the Mavs on vacation to Cancun and helped the Spurs to the finals, where Steve would get his 5th and final ring. The final ring as a player, that is. He's got a few more of those as a coach. And now as we finish the ranking list for the top 5 shooters, it's time to go from one end of the court to the other. You know what they say, offense wins games, and defense wins titles. But it's not just a cliche. Back in 2010, Neil Payne at Basketball Reference looked at nearly 50 years worth of data on title-winning teams. He discovered that while all the title winners are good at both, he noticed that elite defensive teams have a higher chance of winning titles compared to teams that only excel in offense, unless you're the 2018 Warriors. The defender has probably the worst job in the world. They constantly have to chase around star players, get dunked on, have their ankles broken, and watch all-star players drop 30 on them. But they still do it, game after game after game. And there are lots of players to choose from on this list. But I think for the 5th player on the list, I'm gonna go with Marcus Smart. A polarizing player, but I think the perfect player to start with. For one, he's the only player in the top 5 that doesn't have a title, which is why I'm also putting him so low. Plus, his offensive game, although not terrible, is full of bad shot selections, air balls, and stuff like this.
What are you doing?
But this selection is about his defense, not offense. I mean, he's the first guy to win the Defensive Player of the Year award since Gary Payton for a reason. My God, this man can defend. I mean, I've seen him win a game by taking a charge with my very own eyes.
3 to go, and at one point he does not like it. Little pushing and shoving, and a hole.
He's elite at both on and off ball defending. Back in Boston, he was the captain of one of the best defenses in the league. Smart would make hustle plays when needed, directs people where to stand, and points out other teams' plays. Basically, the man does everything from little to big things. Yes, it helped when he was surrounded by great defenders like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Robert Williams, and Evan Turner, but Smart was something else. For years, he's been possibly the most versatile defender in the league. He could switch and guard most positions for a couple minutes a game. I mean, just look at some of the players he guarded in 2023. In 2 games, he guarded Luka for nearly 12 minutes and held him to 4 from 12 from the floor. And he held Steph to shoot 4 from 13 in 9 minutes. And in 3 games, he guarded Nikola Vucevic for over 7 minutes that season, and only let him hit 1 out of 3 shots during that period. Obviously, Nikola is not some offensive mastermind, but you get the point. Center versus shooting guard. And to be honest, Marcus is only in the 5th spot due to a lack of team success. If he stayed with Boston during their 2024 run and got a ring, he would probably be in the top 3. But as we know, without him being in the trade for Porzingis, they may not even get that title. But going to our number 4 pick, I have Caruso. A better defender than Smart?
Blasphemy.
As I said, as a defender, I would probably take Smart over 3 or 4 of these guys. But we're taking everything into consideration. And being a part of a championship team means a lot. Plus, Plus, individually, Caruso still is one of the best defenders today. Remember, this guy went undrafted and had to claw his way into the league through summer league and 10-day contracts. The Lakers picked him up in 2017, and by his third year, he already had one of the best defensive ratings on the team. During the bubble championship, Caruso and Howard were the X factors that helped LA get over the hump and win another title. And when you have LeBron saying this about you, you know he's the real deal.
But the first time I saw him and seen him in some of our practices, it wasn't, the sneaky athleticism. It was the way that he defended and how cerebral he played the game.
Since going to Chicago, he's only further proved LeBron's point. While his steal and block numbers have been great for a guard in 2024, 1.7 steals and 1 block per game, he's gotten even better at forcing turnovers.
He's still learning. Every game is still a learning experience for him because he's so new to, the NBA.
In 2023, Caruso forced 4.5% of turnovers per 100 possessions for his team. Just for reference, the league averages 2.3% for guards, and Alex basically forces twice as many. And in 2024, he led the league in deflections with 3.7 per game. Beyond numbers, his defense just passes the eye test. You can see him hound dudes like KD, preventing them from getting the ball, staying glued on them, and contesting every shot. And if you want more than the eye test, there's the ear test.
No, he's handling it. It's going to be him. He's either going to pitch it back or he's going to keep it and then ball screen. Well, it's one of the options. You come off, you either keep it and then you're going to call him into it or you're going to ISO.
And with him recently getting traded to the Thunder, I could see his value being even higher in the coming years. Okay, with Caruso as our number 4 pick, who is number 3 above him? The league has been around for more than 75 years at this point, so it's not surprising that guys like Tayshaun Prince often get forgotten. But don't worry, Tayshaun, some of us do remember, which is why I'm putting you at number 3 on the rankings. Tayshaun was an early example of a swingman who could guard the paint, chase around shooters on the perimeter, and even guard playmakers if you needed him to. He also had a decent handle and was a good shooter for his time. But let's get back on defense. If Tayshaun is known for anything, it's his shot blocking. While he never averaged more than a block per game, he still has the second most clutch and most famous block of all time.
Tinsley, Reggie Miller, and it's blocked again!
In the 2004 finals, he was assigned to guard Kobe. Although the Lakers' Big Four didn't really gel correctly that year, the Pistons' game plan won them the chip. The plan focused on playing Shaq straight up to bait the Lakers into over-relying on him, while limiting Kobe's touches to frustrate and force him into taking bad shots. Prince put the clamps on Kobe, causing him to have one of the worst series ever, averaging 22.6 points on 22.6 shot attempts. To put it basically, he shot 38% from the floor and 17% from 3. The biggest gripe about Tayshaun was that his prime didn't last for long. By the time he got to Memphis, he wasn't nearly as effective as he was in his prime. But still, during his best years, he was one of the best 5 perimeter defenders in the league. And speaking of forgotten defensive stars, it's hard to believe how many talented players OKC had in the early 2010s without winning a title. Dang their prime KD and Russ, the beard before the beard, and the often forgotten Serge Ibaka. He can be seen as the link between the defensive-minded, paint-oriented big men of old and the versatile 3-point shooting centers of today, which is why he is number 2 on my list. During the early OKC years, people called him Serge Ibaka or the Surge Protector, and for good reason. The 6'11 center led the league in blocks twice in the last decade. In one of those years, he averaged 3.7 blocks, which is a tie with Hassan Whiteside for the highest single-season averages in the 2010s. With 1,300 total rejections and 2.5 per game, he's still the de facto franchise leader in blocks. And when he wasn't blocking shots, he was pressuring opponents into misses. In the 2014 season, Ibaka held opponents to below 48% shooting within 6 feet of the rim, the second best among players who defended at least 7 shots per game. His defense in OKC got him on the all-defensive team 3 times, and he finished 3 times in the top 5 for Defensive Player of the Year. Having Serge on the list might be cheating though, because he was a borderline all-star during his OKC days. But the rules are the rules. By the time he joined Toronto, he started to slow down. His lateral quickness declined with age, and knee injuries didn't help either, which affected his help and recovery defense. But he improved his 3-point shooting a lot and continued providing value off the bench. Under Nick Nurse, Ibaka moved to center and revitalized his game, allowing him to focus more on rebounds and guarding bigs, instead of being a stretch forward who would have to play more on the perimeter. which was important to helping the Raptors win their first trophy. And Serge also had KD on his YouTube cooking show and prepared him some snake. These reasons almost landed Serge at the #1 spot for defenders. But when Kobe is saying things like this about you,
Kobe, toughest defender for you.
Tony Allen. That's easy. Yeah. Tony Allen.
I couldn't have anyone else in the first spot. Tony Allen was the guy some of the best scorers in the world hated to go against. Now, on paper, Tony wasn't the best player out there. 8 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 steals. These numbers may even look below average to some. But Tony was never about the numbers. It was the small details for him. Playing full court press, chasing players through multiple screens, preventing inbound passes, and keeping his right hand in the shooter's face. Somehow without fouling. As Crawford would say,
was there anybody that you were like, oh, that's actually kind of a tough cover?
All guard me, Tony Allen, because he didn't give about scoring. None on offense. It was all defense.
Allen had great anticipation. He would often put himself right in the spot to deny the entry pass to the player he was guarding. Also, Allen was pretty strong too, so he was able to push players off their spots and force them into tough jumpers. Tony was in his prime when shooters were heavily protected, making his ability to play close defense without fouling even more impressive. He effectively disrupted off-ball passing lanes while maintaining the ability to contest shots and help on cuts. To really explain just how good Tony was, we can't just look at basic stats. They look pretty ordinary. To see his true defensive impact, we need analytics. According to 538, Allen has been the best perimeter defender in the last 50 years, and it's not even close. Raptor is an advanced metric that measures how much a player contributes to his team's offense and defense per 100 possessions. Allen has a defensive Raptor of plus 2.8, which is the highest among NBA guards and guard forwards who have played at least 15,000 minutes since the 76-77 season. These numbers place him ahead of other top-notch defenders such as Danny Green, Alvin Robertson, and Michael Jordan. Tony Allen was a crucial role player for the Boston Celtics and the Memphis Grizzlies, contributing significantly to their playoff success with nothing but defense. Trust me, this was next level stuff. For instance, playing with Boston in the 2010 finals, he was the primary defender on Kobe. Allen kept him shooting 40% from the field, 32% from three, with 4 turnovers and fouls. And in the 2013 playoffs, KD only shot 31% when guarded by Allen during the Memphis-Oklahoma series. Although, to be fair, the rest of the players shot 36% when Tony was guarding them. So you can't really blame KD for this one. And besides Draymond, Rodman, and Ben Wallace, I can't really name another player who could change the game just by playing defense besides Allen. And the other 3 guys, well, they're Hall of Famers. Talked about shooting, we talked about defense. Now, let's combine the two, the 3-and-D players. Obviously, these guys excel in 2 important areas of the game today, shooting threes and playing top-notch defense. Ever since Daryl Morey and analytics started dominating the game, 3-and-D guys have become highly sought after. Now, for this section, I could have mostly added guys from the last couple of years, but I have to show respect to some of the pioneers. While some of the veteran players on this list weren't as proficient in overall 3-point shooting compared to today's sharpshooters, their resumes are still impressive. For instance, my top pick made nearly 75% of his 3-pointers from the corner. Despite the evolution of the game, these players' accomplishments are too significant to overlook. But for my first pick, I think all of you remember this guy pretty well. In the 5th spot, we have the most traded NBA player ever, Trevor Ariza. His combination of size, durability, and shooting made him an ideal guard forward in the late 2000s and early 2010s. He won his only championship with the Lakers early in his career, and Ariza spent his best years in Houston averaging around 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 steals. Despite all of this, Ariza has been traded 11 times in his career, surpassing the previous record of 8 trades held by Dale Ellis and Chris Gatling. Ariza's ability as a reliable two-way player made him a valuable addition to teams looking for an extra rotation player to make a postseason push. He also made between $3 to $8.5 million per season, which made him a very convenient piece for balancing trades under the NBA salary cap rules. The next player, although an elite 3-and-D player for his time, wasn't nearly as tradable as Ariza. You may not know a lot about Vernon Maxwell, but if you're a fan of the Gilbert Arenas podcast, you may have seen him there, talking about everything from guarding MJ to the time he almost stabbed his Hall of Fame teammate Hakeem Olajuwon.
Nah, that motherfucker tough to deal with. But when
what's so tough about him dealing with it before he converted?
I said, God damn, this motherfucker slapped the shit out of me. And you know, them Raps got them hard ass hands. That's why I broke the glass I picked up a big piece of glass. I was gonna chase Dream and stab the shit out of him. But then that's when everybody ran out the goddamn locker room, so I couldn't get to nobody. So
they called the man Mad Max for a reason. Vernon was a 6'4" guard that played for the Houston Rockets. And while he was mainly known for wanting to fight everyone from his teammates to the fans in the stands, yeah, back in the 90s, they used to hand check players and fans. Yeah, different times. What people forget though is that he was actually a 3-and-D specialist. He led the league in three-pointers made twice in the early 90s before guys like Kenny Smith, Sam Cassell, and Big Shot Bob came along and took some of his shots. Still, he remained a threat from outside the arc during the 2 Houston Rockets championships. He also played, well, intense defense. He was known for going toe-to-toe with MJ while he was still in his prime. In 7 games between 91 and 95, Mad Max held MJ to under 25 points a game, shooting 42% from the floor. While he often let his emotions get the best of him, the Spurs front office did hire a private detective to follow him around to make sure that he's out of trouble. I mean, Sam Cassell and Kenny Smith still consider him one of the best teammates they ever had.
I appreciate that. And Vernon Maxwell was able to kind of help me become a better player because he was able to bring things out of me offensively and defensively and bring a tenacity that he could carry for 82 games that sometimes I could carry for 50. So I enjoyed playing with those 2 guys.
Okay, let's move on from one of the roughest players to one of the most well-mannered players in history.
Who's the best teammate you ever had?
I would go with Shane Battier.
Here's one of the guys that inspired this video. Well, I came up with the idea later, but the No Stats All-Star article I read in Times about Battier had a huge influence. Shane Battier was a game changer, making waves as one of the first No Stats All-Stars. His impact on the court went far beyond what traditional box scores could capture, often flying under the radar of casual fans. Offensively, Battier was the ideal role player. He could shoot efficiently, maintain proper spacing, make quick decisions, and rarely turn the ball over. And he had a solid 3-point shot when he entered the league. As a rookie, he hit 103 threes on 37%, which in 2002 made him one of the top 3-point shooters in the league. However, a vast majority of his shots were 2-pointers. I mean, he was a tall, strong forward, and in 2000s the game was different, so it made sense. But by the end of his career, Battier became a much better shooter, and by embracing analytics, he started shooting way more threes. By his last season, 210 out of 275 shots he took were from 3. On defense, Battier wasn't the type of player who relied on flashy steals or blocks to make his mark. Instead, he was known for his ability to draw charges, his impeccable timing as the low man in defensive rotations, and contesting shots at the right time to disrupt his opponent. It seems like he pioneered the use of analytics-driven scouting in the NBA. Case in point, he didn't just know Kobe liked driving right, he knew Kobe's shooting dropped 20% when forced left. This detailed approach set Battier apart as an early adapter of on-court analytics. And the crazy part, from what I researched, he didn't even watch a lot of film. He would simply bury his head in the scouting reports and memorize the habits and percentages of players he was going against. He said analyzing these reports was similar to having the answers to the test before taking it. Okay, I know we keep going back to Kobe, but if a player knew how to slow down Kobe, even just a little bit, that man knew how to play defense. Shane's influence can be seen in players like Draymond Green and PJ Tucker, who embody the same defensive versatility and analytical mindset that Battier championed. When I was younger, I always used to confuse Danny Green and Gerald Green for some reason. Danny, Gerald, not that they sound the same, but somehow in my brain it mixed it up. However, that just gives me a great excuse to show my favorite alley-oop of all time. Let's get to Danny now, our number 2 pick on the list. While every owner wants a LeBron or a Wembanyama on their team, every coach wants a Danny Green on his team. And if I needed one word to describe him, it would be reliable. Whether you're playing a random regular season game in January or the 7th game of the NBA Finals, you can start Danny and expect him to knock down threes and play nearly perfect defense for the whole game. Between 2016 and 2019, Green was one of 12 players in the league who guarded point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, and power forwards for at least 11% of his defensive possessions. His shot isn't anything we need to discuss in depth. Throughout his career, he's been a great catch and shoot guy, with over 40% from 3 in several seasons. Whether on the Spurs, the Raptors, or the Lakers, Danny was a great locker room presence and a leader for his entire career. Oh yeah, and he won with all those teams as well. So what really places Danny second in the spot? Besides the rings and the accolades, it's a fact for a good 10-year stretch, there was no team that didn't want Danny Green on their roster. As simple as that. Now, the number 1 spot might be a little controversial, but hear me out. While there have been better defenders and shooters than who I have at number 1, arguably, no 3-and-D player has enjoyed more success than him.
Ever since I've been in this league, people said offense wins games, but defense wins championships. We had some championships here to show that. So,
for nearly a decade, Bowen guarded star players and knocked down important shots, getting him 3 rings and 8 all-defensive teams. You probably know him as a member of the Spurs, who along with Tim Duncan made San Antonio into a defensive powerhouse. And he was one of the best perimeter defenders of his era, the guy assigned to guard the other team's best player. Bowen was also a runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year for multiple seasons. Bruce Bowen's path to success wasn't all that conventional either. After going undrafted, he didn't play his first NBA game until he was 25, when Pat Riley gave him a chance with the Miami Heat. Bowen eventually found his niche with the Spurs, winning 3 championships as a starter. Offensively, he was, I'll just say, modest, but he worked well within the Spurs offense. While never averaging double digits in scoring, he was highly effective from the corner 3-point shot. However, his career free throw percentage was below average at 54%. Bruce Bowen wasn't a perfect player by any means. And I'm not talking about the fact that he'd never averaged double digits, or that his 3-point shooting outside the corner wasn't all that great, but more about his play style. See, back in the mid-2000s, Bruce Bowen was often seen as a dirty player, and for good reason. Remember how Zaza made this dirty play to Kawhi Leonard in the 2017 playoffs? Well, Popovich wasn't very happy.
How much more difficult is it? I mean, how would it be if Curry didn't play? How much more difficult would that be?
But fans were calling Pop a hypocrite because this was a patented Bowen play. Sure, he didn't invent it. There were guys like Bill Laimbeer who were known for intentionally trying to hurt players. But Bowen perfected it. I mean, famous incidents with Michael Finley, Vince Carter, Kobe Bryant, Ray Allen, Amari Stoudemire, Jamal Crawford, Steve Francis, and Wally Szczerbiak. Despite the controversy, Bowen's quote-unquote legal defense was crucial to the Spurs' success. Like said before, he guarded stars like Kobe, T-Mac, Vince, and even bigger players like Dirk. Bowen's defensive impact was reflected in the Spurs' top defensive rankings over the course of his career. While his methods were criticized, his influence on the game is undeniable, making him one of his era's most effective and influential defenders, while also spamming the 3-point corner shot. While the first 3 categories were easy to define, this one wasn't that easy. And that's because, well, any type of player can be the 6th man. A shooter, a backup point guard, a combo forward. The 6th man in basketball is like the team's secret weapon coming off the bench. The role is essential in giving starters a breather without losing momentum. And these guys don't start games, but let me tell you, they often finish them. Before we start, we can't forget about guys like Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford. I mean, Lou Will scored over 13,000 points off the bench and won multiple 6th Man of the Year awards. While Jamal, on the other hand, scored over 11,000 points and had 50-point games with 3 different teams. But with no final appearances, I had to leave them out. So that leaves us with these players. And in the 5th spot, we have the guy with the most interesting tattoo in all of the NBA. And yes, he got it before even winning a championship.
I showed Coach, I'm serious, baby. We're going to win it all this year. Right here. I got a tattoo to prove it.
Jason Terry was a relatively short guard who could have played the 1 or the 2, but was far more comfortable scoring the ball. And man, he could score. His jumper from 3-point range, mid-range, and occasionally as a floater made him a persistent scoring threat. From 2005 to 2007, he shot over 41% from 3-point range for 3 consecutive seasons, and defenses would pay if they left him open. Numbers-wise, Terry peaked in his 2nd and 3rd seasons, averaging nearly 20 points for the Hawks. However, his best years came in Dallas, where he helped Dirk reach the finals twice. In 2009, he averaged 19.6 points with the Dallas Mavericks and won the 6th Man Award. So what cemented Terry as my 5th pick on this list? Mostly that 2011 run. The year Dallas won possibly the most impressive championship this century. Terry had a slew of impressive performances. He dropped a game-high 29 off the bench in Game 3 of the first round. Then there was the time he gave Kobe 9 out of 10 threes in the closing game of a sweep. And then there was his performance in the finals, where he actually outscored LeBron in the final 2 games and kind of embarrassed him on a couple of possessions. And when you can do that to one of the GOATs at the height of his powers, you're top 5 in my book. Speaking of bench players going at GOATs, this brings us to our number 4 pick. Vinnie Johnson wasn't the first famous sixth man. You had guys like Havlicek, Don Nelson, and Kevin McHale before him, and I'm sure some other guys who weren't on the Celtics. But Vinnie provided a template for the modern-day Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams type of players. Guys who are perfect bench players who can come into the game in the middle of the second quarter and erupt for 20 points if needed. He backed up Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars for the Pistons, ensuring there was no drop-off in performance when he was on the court. Vinnie was a 6'2" combo guard who could do a little bit of everything, but he was mainly there for the scoring. Never played more than 30 minutes a game in any season and took just 10 shots on average, yet he consistently averaged double-digit scoring. And he gave you buckets just when you needed him to. Here's him in 1989, giving MJ and the Bulls 16 points to close out the fourth quarter and win Game 5 of the Eastern Finals. This was pretty much a regular occurrence. Here's him dropping 15 in the fourth and casually hitting a game winner against Portland in Game 5 of the Finals. That's why Vinnie, in my opinion, had one of the best nicknames of all time. They did in fact call this man
the Microwave.
And to put the icing on the cake, Johnson's number 15 jersey now hangs in the Raptors alongside Thomas and Dumars. Odom's career ended in a slew of controversial and highly publicized incidents, which led a lot of people to look at him as a punchline. But trust me, on the court, Odom, he was a different person. Odom came into the league billed as the next superstar. He had the height of a power forward, but he could handle the ball and pass like magic, who he looked up to as a high schooler. And all of this is why I'm putting him at number 3. Odom's skill set was diverse. At 6'10", he handled the ball like a guard and had amazing court vision, averaging at least 4.8 assists in 4 seasons, and nearly 6 per 100 possessions for his career. Also, just look at this pass to Darius Miles. I know we're living in the time where Jokic makes passes like this all the time, but let me tell you, this is not something a 6'10" man usually does. Odom found his niche with the Lakers as a key reserve, playing starters minutes and closing games during their 2009 and 2010 championship runs. He was the perfect player for Phil Jackson's triangle offense. He could play in the post, off the ball, or be the playmaker. And he was possibly the only player I can think of who was dang near a consistent double-double threat coming off the bench. While the Lakers fell short in 2011, Odom had a solid year individually and finally won the Sixth Man of the Year award. Unfortunately, after leaving LA, his career completely fell apart. While he mainly talks about his off-court troubles during interviews, I'll definitely remember him as one of the most talented guys to come off the bench, like, ever. And that brings me to my number 2 pick. Similarly to Lamar, Tony Kukoc was a guy tall enough to play a power forward or even a center, but could dribble, pass, and shoot like a guard. And they did call him the Magic Johnson of Europe. So yeah, before LeBron, if you were a tall guy with playmaking skills, you were Magic. Before the NBA, Tony had an amazing career overseas. He won multiple European titles, he got named Mr. Europe 4 times, which is basically like the European MVP at the time. And with Yugoslavia and Croatia, he was winning international medals left and right. When Jordan retired for the first time, the Bulls wanted to make Scottie Pippen the face of the franchise, and their GM, Jerry, envisioned Tony becoming the second option. Again, if you've seen The Last Dance, you know that this isn't what ended up happening. But Pippen and his issues with teammates is a story for another day. In 1995, MJ was back, and after a disappointing second round, the Bulls started building a perfect championship team with MJ, Pippen, and Rodman. Tony was forced to come off the bench, and while he didn't love his new role, he sacrificed for the team. Kukoc averaged 13 points, 4 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game during the 1996 season, coming off the bench to provide a crucial spark. He won the Sixth Man of the Year and his first title that year. Tony's ability to play multiple positions, handle the ball, and be a finisher in the post made him a perfect piece for the Bulls' triangle offense. And his 3-ball helped him fit in with Pippen and Jordan, who would often kick the ball out to him when driving. Kukoc's playmaking ability allowed him to fill in for those same stars when they were off the court, and his 6'10" frame and court vision made him a mismatch for opponents. So what makes Tony the second best off the bench guy for me? Of course, his resume speaks for itself. Sixth Man of the Year award, 3 championships with the Bulls, his clutch performances. The man hit 4 game winners as a rookie. However, we can't ignore how a guy with Tony's skills and European background managed to slide right into the NBA like it was no big deal. I mean, you look into history and there are lots of Eurostars that come to the NBA and seemingly look like end-of-the-bench players. So, Tony's early success, Euro play style, and skill set paved the way for future Euro players like Dirk, Pau, and Peja. Now, what's interesting about our top choice is, on the surface, he looks like the weakest player on the list. No Sixth Man Player of the Year awards, averaged less than 10 points per game. The rest of the stats aren't anything to write home about. So, what made Michael Cooper the #1 pick? Cooper was an essential figure in the Los Angeles Lakers Showtime era, helping them win 5 titles during the 80s. Known for his relentless defense, Cooper often matched up against the opposing team's best scorer, earning a reputation as one of the toughest defenders in the league. Larry Bird even stated that Cooper was the toughest defender he ever faced.
To this day, one of the greatest players in our generations, Larry Legend, Larry Bird. Every time anybody talks to him about, guys that guarded him back in the 80s, doesn't even hesitate to say Michael Cooper was the best defensive player that he ever played against.
He was named to the NBA All-Defensive First Team 5 times and won the NBA Defensive Player of the Year award in 1987, which is unheard of for a bench player. Beyond his defense, Cooper could handle the ball, facilitate plays, and knock down threes with relative efficiency. Listen, when you're attempting 3 3-pointers a game in the 80s, that's like shooting 10 threes a game in today's time. Just for reference, the average NBA team wouldn't start attempting more than 5 threes a game until the 1990 season. He once held the NBA Finals record for the most 3-pointers made in a game with 6 threes. Yeah, the record wouldn't stay his for long, but my point is, Cooper was a pioneer. I really considered placing him on the top of the list for the 3-and-D guys, but I think this category fit him better. After retiring as a player, Cooper transitioned into coaching, where he found success with the Los Angeles Sparks, leading them to consecutive WNBA titles in 2001 and 2002. We finally made it, the last section. I was tempted to name this section the No Stats All-Stars in honor of Shane Battier. Then I realized Shane wouldn't end up in this section, so I'm going with Role Player All-Stars. This spot is reserved for the glue guys who made the difference. When you look at the careers of these guys, they're pretty unique. All of them average less than 10 points per game, but have at least 3 NBA titles and multiple other finals appearances to their name. Combined, these guys have won 22 NBA titles and 31 finals appearances. These guys were usually between the 4th and 5th best players on their team, but they knew their role and played it perfectly. There weren't many players that made this list, so this list should be a lot easier. At number 5, we have a player who's pretty unique. He was never the first option, or the second option, or the third option. He never made an all-star team. Heck, he never even averaged double digit. But John Salley was a heck of a teammate. He was athletic, and he never wanted to be a star. Well, not on the basketball court anyways. Yeah, that's him with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. He's in all 4 of the Bad Boys movies. Speaking of Bad Boys, Salley is best known as a member of the Detroit back-to-back championship teams. With guys like Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and Vinnie Johnson, the team didn't need scoring, but they needed some defense, hustle, and force. All teams had enforcers back then, and the Pistons had more than a few.
Michael was 190, 205 or something like that. I don't know. We knew that if we came in big, he was going to try to shoot over us. He was not going to pass it. The difference is LeBron can see over us. We take away their one threat, the rest of the guys didn't have what it took to beat us.
Salley was an athletic forward. He had some quickness, could jump, and had long arms. Everything you needed to guard players in the paint. He also formed a duo with Dennis Rodman, and they were known as the Worm and the Spider. They would give the Pistons the boost they needed off the bench and got them to win 2 titles. After Detroit, he went through a couple of teams before ending up in Chicago, where he played with his former arch-nemesis MJ, and struck a friendship with Phil Jackson.
John Salley, being the gregarious person that he is, becomes Shaq's spokesperson.
It was actually Jackson who recruited Salley to play for the Lakers after a few years of retirement. In LA, he won with Shaq and Kobe, and became the first player to win championships with 3 different teams in 3 different decades. At number 4 on the list, we have Shaun Livingston, who I actually recently covered in our 2004 draft video. In high school, Shaun was a major star, actually the second best high schooler behind Dwight Howard. Critics were predicting he'd become at least the next Penny Hardaway. However, one of the nastiest injuries in sports history prevented him from that. So instead, Shaun simply became one of the best role players ever. He also ended up having 15 NBA seasons in total, which is kind of crazy when you consider his injury.
I was just so skinny, man, and came down the wrong way, and it just basically exploded. The hardest part was getting through the hospital, that whole situation. And of course, they was talking about the whole amputation and all that. They threw that around early because of the...
His final 5 seasons with the Golden State Warriors solidified his legacy, as he became a key contributor to their 3 championships. Livingston was not only the perfect guy to run your second unit, he could score, play defense, and dish out like a young Jay Kidd, but he was also a master of the mid-range. The Warriors tended to fall in love with the three, and when the ball wasn't going in, a few back-to-back mid-rangers were just what they needed. The teams that lived and died by the three usually just died. We all remember the meltdown of the Rockets missing 27 threes in a row. Well, Livingston lived and died by the midi. There were seasons where he was the only guard with more than 1,000 minutes played without making a three-pointer. And after retiring in 2019, he transitioned to a mentorship role with the Warriors, helping young players on the squad act like professional athletes on and off the court. While Sean has fewer rings than Sally, he was a much more skilled player on the individual level, so I'm raising him one spot above. The next man is ranked higher than the first two because of continuity, and for making the finals in 3 different decades with one franchise. If you ever wondered what the term Heat culture means, you don't need to look any farther than Udonis Haslem. He's a guy who always worked hard, played his role to a T, and always put team success before his personal success. Of course, this doesn't mean that Haslem's career is without highlights. Haslem is one of 10 players in league history to play 20 or more seasons. He's only one of 3 players in history to spend 2 decades with one team, the other 2 being Dirk and Kobe, but Haslem is the only one to do it in his hometown. So how did Haslem play? I think tough is the best word that describes him. I mean, early in his career, Pat Riley tasked him with being a defender, rebounder, and enforcer for the Miami Heat, and he did it for nearly 2 decades. And you know how everyone talks about Ray Allen saving LeBron's legacy in 2013? Haslem kind of did it the year before. In the 2012 Eastern Conference semifinals, with the Miami Heat down 2-1 against the Indiana Pacers and Chris Bosh injured, Haslem stepped up in Game 4. He scored 14 crucial points, including several key mid-range jumpers in the fourth quarter, and played tough defense, helping the Heat avoid a 3-1 deficit. Not including Haslem would definitely be blasphemous. I mean, how many role players do you know had their jerseys retired? Now, this is another player that should have his jersey retired, and there's been talk of it for years. At number 2, I have Derek Fisher, who played with the Lakers for 13 years and won 5 titles with the franchise.
So you played with a ton of great players in your 18 years in the NBA. So my question is, of all the players that you either played with or against, what's the one person that you would pick as a teammate?
I'd say Derek Fisher.
His numbers don't jump off the page, but you've seen the name of this section. So you know that Fisher was much better than his stats would suggest. D-Fish was a no-nonsense, hard-working, blue-collar player who complemented the 2 superstars. Also, he was one of the calmest and clutch players in history. Fisher's opportunity to shine as a starter came in the 2001 season when injuries opened up a spot for him. Despite initial skepticism from coach Phil Jackson, Fisher's solid performance in the playoffs helped secure the Lakers their 3rd consecutive NBA title. And over his career, Fisher proved himself as a reliable shooter, hitting crucial shots in key moments. He famously hit a buzzer-beating three-pointer with 0.4 seconds left in Game 5 of the 2004 conference semifinals against the Spurs, earning it the nickname Mr. Point 4. Fisher's knack for hitting big shots continued into the Lakers' 2nd title run. In the 2009 finals against the Magic, he hit a game-tying 3, then a go-ahead 3 in OT to win Game 4. In the 2010 NBA Finals, he made a crucial and-one play in Game 3 against the Boston Celtics, helping the Lakers secure their 2nd consecutive championship. I would declare D-Fish as the most clutch role player in history if it wasn't for the guy in the first spot. Robert Horry. He is definitely the name you think when someone mentions role players. Despite averaging 7, 5, and 2 and not collecting a single individual award, Horry was a winner, and he has 7 rings to prove it. Some people would call Rob the luckiest NBA player of all time. He wasn't even a top 3 player on most of his teams. And as Reddit user Record Reviewer points, Horry actually had an MVP caliber teammate each year he played in the NBA. But there's more to his career than luck. All these MVP candidates really wanted to play with him. Horry's journey to the NBA success began with the Houston Rockets, where he won his first 2 championships in '94 and '95. In these early years, he showcased his versatility and reliability, contributing to team success in many ways. His knack for hitting big shots earned him the nickname Big Shot Bob. And one of his most iconic moments came in the '95 NBA Finals against the Orlando Magic, where he sank a game-winning three-pointer in Game 3, helping the Rockets secure a crucial victory.
No time to wait. Horry for 3. Yes.
Horry wasn't just fearless in the clutch, he had this, I don't really care about anything attitude. I mean, here's Horry at Alabama, fouling a young Shaq and staring him down. Yeah, but don't worry about the two. They would become teammates some 10 years later. So when Horry got to LA, he fit in perfectly, winning 3 consecutive championships from 2000 to 2002. And one of Horry's most memorable moments came in Game 4 of the 2002 Conference Finals against the Sacramento Kings. With the Lakers trailing late, Horry hit a game-winning buzzer beater.
Tipped out to Horry, a straight on 3, good!
Tying the series and propelling the Lakers to victory, eventually winning another NBA title. After his tenure with the Lakers, Horry significantly contributed to championship-caliber teams, including the San Antonio Spurs. And he actually played a crucial role in the Spurs' 05 NBA championship run, delivering clutch performances throughout the playoffs, which is why I have him at my #1 spot. Horry retired as the player with the most rings in the modern era. Could his career have played out any better? Well, from a team standpoint, not really. But could he have been better individually? Or was he maybe too lazy to be an all-star?
Rob just hangs out the entire game. He does it all season long. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't feel like playing. He shows up sometimes. And then you put him in a fourth quarter in a big game, whether it be regular season or the playoffs, and he's like, okay, it's time to play now. I've been hanging out the entire season. It's time to play now. And he just turns it on. And as funny as that seems, it's how it looks. It's how it is. He doesn't want to show up. He doesn't feel like playing until it's a big game.
Now, I usually have some motivational speech at the end of my videos, but for this one, I don't. So I'll keep it simple. What do you think of the list? And are there any players I missed out on? And well, if you think so, let me know in the comments. Y'all know I'm not ducking any smoke in the comment section. And hey, if you're still here at the end of the video, you got time, go check out one of these other videos showing on the screen right here.